Hello, everybody. So I'm Carly, and today's masterclass is how to produce high selling products. So high selling, high sell through. The end goal is obviously to sell the volume that you need to obviously make as much money as you can. But the aim of the game is to produce to demand. That's like the most important lesson here. So the agenda, what are we going to go through today? So pretty much it's a 5-step checklist. That's kind of how I've structured it and how I would teach it to others. So the first one is, have you hit gold? So it always starts with this classic sentence, which is, what is your niche? So you may hear loads of people talk about it, and it really, really is one of those business critical lessons that you're not just going to use for like the beginning of your business when you're launching. It's actually something you should use for every single time that you go into launching a new product. You need to make sure that there is demand for it. So it's always going to be a topic that you should be working on, to be honest, to make sure that you produce high selling products. So the next topic will be the right balance of fat and sugar. So you normally have to balance more things like than in your diet than those two, but this is all about demand and data. Let's quickly admit that person. So really, really important topic again, and that really will go into things like demand forecasting, which again is a really critical lesson to producing high sell-through products. The next one, deep roots. So really, at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you know your customer and market inside out, because again, by knowing them inside out and getting deep into that data, then you're going to be able to create products that will sell through because you're really targeted to them and to their needs. And then the next topic 4, will I alienate or will I attract? So pricing strategy, because at the end of the day, you'll probably do this. I know I do it. If I see a product that's like, I don't know, £200, instantly you'd be like, ooh, £200, really? Can I? So a price can really just put somebody off. So it's really important you get that right. And then topic 5, so the proof is in the add to cart. So at the end of the day, you can do all of this research, that's great, but will they actually add it to the checkout? So that's really the way that you're going to be able to validate all of this data and information that I'm going to talk you through today. So I'll make sure for sure that there'll be time at the end for questions. Oops, my thing doesn't click. There we go. So better tell you about me first. So hello, I'm Carly, and my business is called Carly Johnson. So it's not hard to remember. It's actually my name. And I launched back in 2019. My background really, I'm British, as you can tell, but I live in Australia at the moment. And I've had a pretty comprehensive background in fashion. So I started off in design back in the day, and I actually worked out at DVF in New York. And then since then, I've progressed into buying roles and then subsequently into wholesale roles. So quite comprehensive between knowing how to actually construct a product all the way through to how to buy a range for e-commerce, for stores, etc. So quite comprehensive background. And my business is more nowadays focused towards lecturing, teaching. So that could be students, i.e. like yourselves, that are doing your own thing, or it could be people at universities, etc. So a bit of a broad spectrum. And then also wholesale sales. Like if you've been to one of my talks before, I love wholesale. So I talk a lot about how to succeed in wholesale. So feel free to hit me up if you've got any questions about that as a secondary side note. So that is a little intro about me. Cool. So as mentioned, so today's structure is what is all about this repeatable 5-step formula. So in my mind, and from what I teach, if you follow this, you're going to repeatedly produce high selling product. So the main thing I want to just kind of drum into you that obviously if you've already launched a product, it's fine, it's all good. But ideally from this step forward is to not think, oh, okay, I've got this great idea, I've always wanted to do this, and start developing it and going straight into the deep end. What I'm teaching you today is really actually months ahead of actually spending money on developing. So really think of the critical path and really think of, before that pen touches the paper, this is everything that you need to do to actually validate and to do the research to really, again, make sure that you've got a solid basis for your product, for your business, before going into actually developing that product. Because all of this upfront work that you'll do is really the foundations that will make that product sell, because you, again, have done the research. So it's a 5-step formula, which is pretty much your checklist. And yeah, this will help you to really understand your market, your product, and how to sell it. Cool. So 5-step process, pretty short and concise in the way I've written it here. So 1, find your niche, demand and data, market and knowing your audience, pricing strategy, and then validation. So in fact, I've broken it down a little bit more. Forgot that I did that. So niche, I have already talked about this, but really, 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 really importantly, it's really the most fundamental thing to getting the concept right. Because if you actually, again, just produce something because it's on a whim, then you're not actually validating that somebody's going to buy this. So again, if you really get that concept right, that you really know that there is demand for that product, it technically will sell itself, because you've produced to that demand, you've produced something that's unique that will captivate that audience. So this niche concept is really, really important. Step 2, as mentioned, knowing how to read and understand data, because again, this will, if you know how to understand information out in the market, in business, in fashion, in e-commerce, this will then teach you how to make the right decisions again. So it's not just a gut decision, you're actually being business smart, business savvy. And yeah, it'll positively influence you when it comes to forecasting and really fundamentally important things around how much money you're spending, how much stock you're buying. And that, again, has a knock-on effect to your sell-through. And then market and audience research. So pretty much you're a product-based business. You are producing a product for a person. That's your audience. So at the end of the day, you should never, ever forget about your audience. They are literally the end goal. If you didn't have an audience, you wouldn't have anyone to sell to, therefore you'd make no money. So knowing everything about them, as I mentioned, deep root, it's so, so important. So I'm actually going to, in this step, really go through, if you've already got an audience, then how to actually use that data and evolve it. And then in 4, so as mentioned, a price to me, especially as a consumer, can put me off or turn me on, however you want to phrase it. So we'll go through how to actually structure that pricing strategy, because as I've put on the screen, if you break it, i.e., you're not making it, you're breaking it, then you could lose that customer. It's so instant. It's kind of sad, but that's a fact. And also, if you break it, you could have just done it wrong, therefore you're not going to make any profit. So you have to make sure it works on both sides. And then 5, just due diligence. Ask your audience. Like, don't make these decisions by yourself, because again, as mentioned, you're a product-based business selling to a customer. Therefore, ask them, do they actually like what you're doing? Because again, if they say no and you produce it, are you going to sell it? No. Are you going to have high selling product? No. So again, it's this like circular motion of this 5 steps where it's really engaging and seeking all of these data sources and then making the right decision, but finally running it past your audience to get that final verification. Cool. Okay, so that's a bigger explanation about what we're going to go through. So the end goal, another point to highlight, and that's kind of, again, why I like to talk about these things to businesses. So at the end of this masterclass, you're not just going to be able to learn how to produce a high selling product, but also you're going to be being sustainable. You're going to be reducing waste and avoiding landfills, because you're producing to demand. So therefore, you're not overproducing and therefore having surplus stock. and having to ship it around the world to TK Maxx or to, anywhere else to try get rid of it. You're actually running a lean business model, which is both profitable, but also is environmentally more so on point. And again, yes, you're really not adding to that markdown crazy world that exists today. So there are far greater benefits than just thinking, okay, I want to make loads of money and sell loads of product. It's actually also being sustainable and lean in the way that you're operating, which again is something you could use in your marketing tactics. So yeah, so it's a really positive lesson. Cool. So if you haven't already kind of grasped the concept, today is going to be very data driven, because as mentioned, you really shouldn't be making these decisions based on, I want to make a dress, so I'm going to make a dress. If you want to produce a high selling product, it needs to come back to the data and the demand therefore in your market. So you have to really gain this info, these sources, and make a data driven decision. So also, if you grasp the concept now early on in your business about how to seek data sources, seek information, and therefore be reactive to this information. So, as soon as COVID happened, like how reactive were you as a business? What data were you listening to out there? What could you have done to have been better? So really, again, in this, setting yourself up as a structure of a business, what sources are you listening to? How reactive can you be? Are again going to be positive factors to you selling through your product more successfully, because you reacted to X when it was happening in an early stage. So it is really, really important to get the right data sources now early on in business that you can react. So cool. So let's find your niche, as I put, your boom, your point of difference, your reason to buy. So that's the starting point. Step one. So finding your niche, you need to get the concept right. That's someone finding some piece of gold, and hopefully we'll find yours. That's a bit cliche, but there you go. So what is the goal? As mentioned, you want to take your starting point. So this is now where we're getting into the nitty gritty. So again, I keep talking about dresses. You've got this concept of either you're launching a brand, this is my idea, or you've got this next product that you're thinking of launching. What is that starting point? And then you need to run it through some validating factors to actually find out, is there demand for this? So how I do this is via a 6-step process. So the first one is identifying market demand.
Oh, you're in my classroom, girl.
Oh, sorry.
Good night.
Oh, I don't know if you can hear me. You're on noisy over there.
Oh, it's right. It's good.
Sorry, I'm trying to mute it. 1 second.
What is
Sorry, Carly, I think I muted you.
That's all good.
Muting.
Really good.
Can you hear? Cool. I think I'll keep going. Yeah, I think that sounds better. Great. Perfect. So yeah, first step, identify market demand. Next, what are your competitors doing? Because really you always want to be this like competitive person so you can take the advantage on them. Who is your target audience? So you need to always know this because it affects everything you do, your marketing, the design of your products. What is the best channel for you? So again, you can capitalize on the demand. Then the next step is how to price your product competitively to appeal to the audience. And then the final step is validating your idea. It's the final layer. So pretty much this again is topic 1. And this is a 6-step process to actually really find your gold in the market. Oops, gosh, this keeps not clicking. Okay, cool. First bit. So firstly, I've talked about this in other lectures, but pretty much this is something I won't stop talking about because it's super important. You need to take this starting point and run it through these recommended tools. So these are 3 that I'm recommending now on the page. So the only one that's the paid one is Google Trends. These other ones you can access for free. So you can take this idea, this concept. So it could be sustainable swimwear, it could be plus size nighties, it could be even more specific, sexy, sustainable lingerie, whatever it is, the starting point, the concept. And what you're testing here is how highly is it being searched for on the likes of Google, on YouTube, on the biggest search engines in the world. Because at the end of the day, e-commerce is a starting point for a lot of shoppers. And that's for you guys, I can only assume you're online-based businesses. Therefore, it's fundamental to actually check what is the demand for this starting point, this idea of your product via these keyword tools. So pretty much I recommend that this starts ASAP. So if you're thinking of launching a new product, a new collection, I really encourage you to start to track the trends at least 3 months before you actually, again, have the intentions to start developing this product. So let's run through some examples because, again, that's most important. So some of you may or may not know Google Trends. But here it's pretty much you search a term, a topic, and it will come up with suggestions. So let's just go for sustainable fashion. And so this here you can see over time, this is actually showing you what the actual search volume is. And I think I'm in Australia, so apologies. You could niche down and look at just like the past 7 days rather than looking at a greater period of time. So we can see that there was a peak 2 days ago. We can see specifically in the area how popular it was. Then you can start to see related topics. So what are people more specifically looking at? So this is one that's quite suggestive to general topics, terms, as opposed to niching more heavily into that. Within that, you could break it down further. Then let's move on to another one because that was not overly the best example. Let's do Amazon, apologies. So let's go for plus size swimwear, not a robot. So here we can see in the US, and this is a far greater and better example. So this is specifically looking, that's a good thing with this specific tool, is that you can actually choose to look at different channels. So for example, Amazon we know is fashion, so it's a good starting point. Google would be the biggest, the most common. So that also would be a smart move to compare how it searches on Amazon versus Google. But again, what you're trying to find here is, okay, cool, that's my keyword. This is my product idea. This is what I think I should be moving into because that's my starting point. But again, is that being agreed to based on the demand in the market? So here again, you would make it as specific to you, whatever country you're going to be launching in. And this could then start to suggest to you. So obviously I've gone quite generic. 51K, you can't really beat that. That's pretty high demand that people are searching for plus size swimwear and Amazon in the US. But this would then start to show you the niching levels again. So you can start to see, okay, interesting, like beneath that is cover up. So that's niching that product more. So you can start to think that's an opportunity there. So could I start to search for this further? Let's see what that, for example, is on Google. So here you can see there is, so 1.3, gosh, I can't even see the numbers then, 1.3, so far similar, but again, far less than just the generic plus size swimwear. So again, this is suggesting cheap. So that's quite interesting. There was only 30 in 7 days. So it's not showing you the biggest date range. Obviously, you could do a trial and start to expand that and see. So what I would suggest with these types of tools, hence why I'm saying to start this at least 3 months before is to actually, if you think you've found something, you've whittled it down a little bit more. So it's not the most generic, biggest idea. It's got a bit more niche because you're looking at plus size swimwear cover-ups. It's still got a high volume. I start to put that into a spreadsheet and actually start to track that month on month to actually see, is this trending up, trending down? Or if you're trying to decide it between, say, plus size swimwear and let's just say sustainable swimwear, and you're really keen to do both, what's the trend of that in Google, in Amazon? How's that trending over the months? So yes, you can see here, it's the data is in there for you, so you can look back, but also I think it's just very relevant to bring it into a sheet and to start jotting down your ideas and watching the flow yourself in an environment that you can control on a spreadsheet. So finally, this is very similar, but out of interest, let's just see what it does on Uber Suggests as another free tool for you to be able to look at. So the good thing with this one is it'll actually, so here we can see very similar. They're obviously all looking at the same Google search engine. So this is one that I tend to favor when I'm introducing it to people, that you can see again of the competitive side behind this tool. So SEO difficulty, that's out of 100, so that's actually quite low. So that's saying organically you've got more competition to rank against this key phrase, this product niche, when you move into advertising, etc. Or if you're doing blog posts, you've got more of an organic nature to be able to rank on Google first page when you're going after a key phrase like this, because that's pretty low out of 100. So also down here, there's more suggestive categories. And then also you can start to look at content. So you can start to read more about what competitors are these that are ranking for plus size swimwear, which will help you with competitor analysis. What platforms are they selling on? What stores are they selling in? So all of this data that you're gathering by using these pretty much demand tools is helping you to, again, verify the search. How many people are searching for your product? What are your competitors? Because you can look at relevant links, and in Amazon, you could have clicked onto relevant pages, and you're starting to track that data. You're starting to document it into your sheets so you can actually understand the popularity, the demand. Because again, the importance of this lesson is literally trying to teach you, don't just go on a whim and produce something that's literally got 10 people searching for it in Google every single month, because you're going to spend so much money in trying to push people to your website. It's going to be so expensive to force your product in front of people. If you actually start to look at things like the SEO difficulty and it's quite low, then that actually means you've actually got an organic natural chance to rank for this type of product in this market. So pretty much put your data hat on, become a scientist, and really start to whittle down into this. And this is something to do repetitively to make sure that trend is staying there in your market, so that it's, again, not on a whim. It's not just a quick decision. And any of these that you start to read more into could give you more ideas and inspire you. So it's a really fundamentally important starting point. Okay, cool. So back on with this. So we've gone through that. So in addition to that, so yes, you can get data from these keyword tools. You can't ever shy away from reading publications in your industry. So let's just say WGSN is always a great one for suggesting up and coming trends, product ideas, something that's new. Also industry reports. So that could be McKinsey, it could be Business of Fashion do a report, any of those. So always take the data that Google's telling you, because that's hard facts, that's an online shopper shopping for it, but then also mix that back with industry information, because that, again, is something you can't shy away from. And together you could map this into a spreadsheet and start really thinking about this deeply, as opposed to just an idea. So the last thing, which we'll touch on later, is if you're already live and selling, this kind of starting point validation is actually, you can do it in a different way. Because, for example, if you're on Shopify and you use Shopify Analytics, you can actually start to see which products have been clicked on the most, therefore which ones are in a higher demand. Therefore, that would suggest that you should do a similar type of product to that because it's your most popular, or it could suggest that that price point was right. But pretty much you'll already have data in Google Analytics and Shopify that you can then take and use as a starting point to think, okay, my customer clearly likes this, what more can I do on it? And then you could then work reverse and actually go back to these tools and start to plug it in to see if the searches are there in Google for it. Cool. So that is, oops, gosh, sorry, there we go. So yeah, pretty much in that step, it's a detailed one. I encourage you to play in it, get comfortable in it. You may always not like what you see, i.e., your idea could be, dampened, but it's really, really important because again, it's just an immediate indication that if you are to produce something that's not in demand, it's just not going to sell. Cool. So now you have a niche, you've got a validated idea. You need to keep going on this validation process. As I mentioned, this is a 6-step process. So the next thing is to look at who are your competitors in this space. And it's always a case of, with a competitor analysis, how can you do it better? So that's always the question. So yeah, competitor research on here. These are the focus areas. You're looking at by category, what's their entry and exit price point? What's the fashionability? So what's the proportion of fashionability? Because again, if they're mainly doing basics, there's an opportunity for you to introduce fashion. Like, what is that looking like? Success. So start to get a bit stalkerish, start to read their customer reviews, start to monitor their website to see if they're going into sale often, because therefore that could suggest that product's not doing well. And then also look at their delivery and return promises, because that could suggest an opportunity to you. What's their reward scheme and what's their overall styling? Is it good? Is it bad? What can you learn from it? What can you do better? So this is probably one that people might be like, Carly, why are you saying this? This is naughty. But with competitor analysis, so you can go through this, you can table this up, you can start to draw some analysis, which would tell you all of their prices are so cheap. I've got an opportunity to offer something different at a higher price point, table it up, gain some analysis. But one thing that the kind of overarching question is what are they doing well at from your summary? And it's a case of, and I'm doing it in brackets, copy it. So don't be afraid to say, okay, they've got this like epic delivery promise or whatever that's like so unique, I've never seen it before. Pretty much you could go and do your version of it, because if you don't do it, somebody else is no doubt going to do it. So it's not a case of literally copying someone's work. We're talking about being inspired from it. It's something that's obviously doing well. So how can you pretty much copy it, but do it better? So that's always a way of seeing, like, what are my competitors doing and how can I just do it better? And don't be afraid to be inspired, copy, and just do it better. So really, competitor analysis, it's something that we'd have learned at uni, at school, whatever you want to say, but it's something, again, in this, I want to launch a new product. How can I make sure it's a high sell-through? You've just got to find out the demand, find your competitors and do it better, because you want to be best in market. So be inspired by others, stick to the original concept because that's what the demand was telling you, but work out how you can do it better. Cool. So the next one. So, audience. Gosh, I don't know who is your target audience. So I've got trigger happy fingers. So who's your target audience? Pretty much this is one I'm going to go into in so much more detail. So I've just put a slide here to remind me. Target audience, fundamental, so fundamental, because it influences everything that you do. So I'll go through this in detail in topic 3. So we'll skip that out of the 6 steps for now. So step 4 in this 6-step process is what channel is best for you. So this is something to actually decide in the beginning to really isolate this niche, this demand for your product, because again, they all go hand in hand. You shouldn't just think of one individually isolated, because again, you need to know who your audience is to make sure the price is right, to make sure that that audience shops on this channel. So things like knowing who your audience are influences your channel, that influences so many different things. So this is like one big circling ball of decisions, and that's this 6-step process. So pretty much with deciding what channel, in the first tool that the last tool that I showed, Uber Suggests, that has links to loads of different articles based on that keyword, your product, your niche. So that is a method within that research phase, that step 1, that you can actually start to pretty much be suggested what channels are right. So you could be out of your market research, you could have learned there are up and coming platforms in India that because there was an article talking about your specific niche that reference the demand, and that they're soon to be launching on some Indian e-commerce platform. Or you could have learned about the top 5 marketplaces in the UK. So really in that initial research phase, when you're looking at keywords, sit in those tools heavily and actually go off as on a tangent of what articles are suggested to you, because again, it's like an immediate link that your product, that keyword features in XYZ, which then could suggest to you platforms, channels that you should be selling your product on. So aside from that, when deciding this, there's also industry reports, which I mentioned McKinsey on the other reference point, but Statistica, if you're not familiar with that, is a fantastic platform. You can get free reports in there, but there's also a paid model. Shopify, they also have fantastic reports, and all of these publications, they're fantastic ways to work out what's trending, what's not, what's the right channel based on the demand in the market. Where are people shopping right now? Because again, in fashion, it's all about trends. It's all about working out what is popular. And yes, you don't have to be following trends in fashion, but when it comes to e-commerce and trends and shoppers' habits and things like that, that's a trend that you really do need to follow. So it's important that you, research again and actually find out what makes sense in your market. So the next level of this is also not forgetting, which was kind of an original point, that great, let's say Statistica says that YouTube's like hugely growing and there's more commerce happening on there. Fantastic, great, YouTube. What about your audience? So obviously we haven't really gone into that because we're going to do it later, but is your audience a YouTube shopper? So you can't step away from, which is something that's heavily used in marketing still, the generation classifications. So millennials, Gen X, boomers, etc. They all are stereotyped, or I say we are all stereotyped based on our habits that we've formed or habits that we've fallen into over the years. So there's definite statistics information, and especially the likes of these guys do lots of reports on it about what's trending within the generations, to do with let's say baby boomers are still more for reading magazines, so therefore that's something you could consider working with a catalog channel. Gen Zs are more of an interesting bunch of what they do and don't want. So really it's a case of, yes, you've got your audience in far greater detail on this, but not forgetting when you're deciding about a channel, which one is actually right for your overarching audience type. So hopefully that makes sense, that there's more factors to consider when making this decision. And then step 5 within this one is price. So I'm going to do this in more detail again, so bear with me. This is going to come, but I honestly have mentioned it. You're at the end of the day, you're going to love, even dream of a product. You know, you might have like seen something in Selfridges and be like, oh my God, love it, I love it, I love it. But if the price is just simply wrong, you're not going to buy it. It will remain in your dreams forever and a day. So pricing is something that it's an instant reaction. You're either in or you're out. So it really is important that the look of the product matches to the price, that matches to your audience wallet size. So getting that balance right is extremely important, because again, that's an instant yes or no to the customer actually buying it, which means high or low sell through, obviously, if they don't buy it. So that is going to be covered later. So the final step of this, which again is touched on later because it's all one big circular thing, is validation. So you've looked at tools to find out, okay, there's a demand for my product. You've seeked the competitor advantage from your audience, which is refined, not your audience, your competitors refined you more. You've understood your audience. Okay, cool, I'm answering their pain points of my product. You know that you've got the right channel. Okay, that makes sense. So you've gained all of this information. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is validate. So I'll again, as mentioned, it's covered later, but really out of all of this info that you've got from sources, the biggest thing now is to actually make a decision and actually summarize, what does this mean? So does it mean that you're going to have a winning concept that's different here? Does it mean that you're going to be again answering the pain points of your customer? Really, you need to take time out and then come back and look at this and really start to say, like, okay, have I hit the nail on the head? Do I need to go back and revisit a step? Have I really hit the nail on the head again with your niche? Because as mentioned in the beginning, I've worked with so many brands. There's one that I'm doing sessions with at the moment that's just lost. She's like, I have no idea who my audience is. Why is my product not selling? And it's just this, have I got it right? Have I actually discovered who I am and what's my place in the market? So there's a lack of confidence. And so it's kind of taking it back to basics of, okay, here are these validating steps you can do, the 6 steps we've just walked through. And then what does that actually summarize to you? So I've just given some quotes on the screen, which are very generic and a side note, but you know, if someone says 55% of women in the UK wish they could try before they buy online, these types of summary sentences, okay, what does that suggest to you as a business owner that you should be doing? So what does your data tell you that you should be doing? That's how you now need to read the steps and actually come to some summary, to some decisions. So yeah, really, really important that this is followed for every new product you take, because again, if you hit the nail on the head and you produce a product that's in demand, it will sell itself because you've got the demand via Google. People are searching for it. You have to put less marketing and effort into it. You can start to organically list for it based on blog, based on, yes, a small amount of marketing input as opposed to huge, and you can actually feature on the first page ideally of Google and have your product there beneath some of your major competitors. Like, that's the end goal. You're trying to really find your place in the market that's unique, that just gives you that better opportunity to sell your product. So that's why this step is kind of a challenging concept for some brands, because again, if you've had this pipe dream of always being a dress brand, and I'm just keeping it generic, and the data doesn't tell you this, you've either got a decision. You're either going to go after your pipe dream and just put the money in it and make whatever you can of it. Who knows, it could work out. Or you can make a business decision to go after what the demand is and make a smart, I'm going after the sales. Once I've established myself as a brand or have the financial revenue behind me, then maybe I could put my attention to doing a side brand that is always what I've wanted to do. So it really is, yeah, again, making that decision. The choice is yours, but this is how I'm encouraging you to see it, to actually, hit the nail on the head and actually produce the product in the first place, that actually will sell itself. Okay, cool. So step 2 is all about demand and data. So really this is bit where, again, we've talked about data in the beginning, but this is how it should start to influence your decisions when it comes to forecasting. So this is now moving it into the world that you've actually got a product and you need to actually work out how much to produce to the demand in your market. So that's a bit of a smiley face, but this is something that you can have this deck and you can go and obviously do it at a later date, but I've got a YouTube video on it and that's a blog post. So if what I talk about isn't enough, then that's just some extra reading and viewing for you. Cool. So yeah, what this lesson is going to bring together is everything you've just learned in topic 1. So it's using that theory and actually focusing it more so onto actually how many units do I need to buy? How do I run a lean model? So again, this links back to the very beginning opening phase of this talk, is the in demand forecasting. This is now where you're wanting to produce to the demand, that you're wanting to be sustainable in that outlook, that you're really getting into the nitty-gritty of how much you should buy of that red dress, because this is what your plan is. So for any of you that hate Excel, unfortunately, it's needed to help you with this step. And it's just a lot of, yes, you can use data for sure in this, absolutely, but also there's an aspect of your gut feeling, your understanding of your industry. So when it comes to demand forecasting, the word forecasting is, I guess, the main one. It's not fact. It can't ever be a given number. Every brand's going to be different. You, again, really need to work out how much you need to produce to the demand of your audience in your market. So this one is, you'll probably hate me for this as well by the end of it. This is a 12-point checklist. So many a checklist for you today. Cool. So this is the 12. I'll obviously go through them individually, but that's just like the checklist that obviously you can come back to later. So yeah, the first one, we don't need to go much into this because we've done quite a bit of research methods already. So I'll move on to the next ones. So I just said that, but I won't. Research past and current trends. So in the first step, so that's where you start. So pretty much, I guess, to split these up, there are, so the number 1 to number 6 is all about the base work of demand and data, which links back to the topic 1. Then we move more into being specific about the actual product. So yeah, so as mentioned in the topic 1, where it's all about researching, like what's happening, things to add on top of this, to layer on top of the pie when you're working out how much to produce of your product in your market, is actually considering what are the past and current trends. So when I say that's quite a broad thing, when I'm talking about your market, so I'm very much talking about e-commerce in this scenario. Obviously, it could be different for you. So what's the past and current trends in e-commerce? And then also what's the past and current trends in women's online fashion in e-commerce? What's the trends for exactly that in the UK? So pretty much you're really wanting to understand what is trending at the moment, what has been a previous trend, and therefore what could come in the future. So again, this is all how do I get this information? So we've talked about it in the first step, and this comes down to heavily reading and being subscribed to publications that will give you this type of information, as much as reading, even the Telegraph, like New York Times, like subscribing and having this inbox that will have certain publications, and maybe you can review this over time, get rid of some, add some more in, but having an inbox that maybe you set time aside on a weekend if you don't want to interrupt your day-to-day, and you actually digest this information. Ideally, you should be doing it daily so that you're being reactional. But yeah, subscribing to publications, it could be, again, signing up for WGSN, it could be signing up for Statistica, but actually getting reports to start to understand what's happening very, very specifically in your industry, in your market. Because things like this, again, help you to be reactional. So you can really understand what the future might be for your industry. Therefore, how can you get ahead and start to implement things for the better? So that could be click and collect. It could be I'm trying to think of other things of what's like happening at the moment, like Black Friday this year. Like who have you in your business, like how have you predicted how huge it's going to be? Obviously, we're about to turn into the November. Is it literally going to start at the beginning of the month and end at the end of the month? Like Black Friday is something that's like changed every single year. It used to be a day, now it's like the whole month practically. So in these research of past and current trends, this is how it's going to influence what you do in your sales plan, and also in how much stock that you buy for these time periods. So this might sound overwhelming, but when we come to the end of this topic, what I'll show you is that you'll always forecast a season at a time. So you'll break it down to 6 months. So these types of this type of information, this type of research, are things, again, that you can table and start to summarize what research has suggested to you that will happen in these months, or the importance of Black Friday, or the importance of shipping habits. Or there might be, still in the UK, there's a huge issue with trucks at the moment. So how's that going to have a knock-on effect to your intake? All of these factors are things that you need to write down and then really work out the most important, and how that's going to affect the flow of your stock in and your sales going out. Cool. So other things, this is obviously, it's a bit dated, unfortunately, that one point. What other factors could affect the trends of your product? So let's say you're a sports brand and like you were live and kicking just before the Olympics happened. Amazing. Will it affect your sales during that season? Could you do any specific Olympics marketing to push that? So again, when you're forecasting, when you're demand forecasting your product, think bigger picture. So then at this kind of factor, take yourself maybe out of your isolated industry of your market and think, what else is happening in the world? What other factors could influence the demand of my product in the market? So yeah, Brexit, is that going to have an all of a sudden effect on the consumer wanting overseas product only, or is it going to make you desire your localized artists more? Who knows? What do you think would affect your audience? And that is, again, why this kind of step has come after the first one, because it's important that you understand how your audience would think and feel and react to these types of trends, to these types of factors. So the next one is research consumer behaviors. So again, you know your audience, cool, great, correct. But you could take this a step back and think of your overarching generation, stereotypes, category, whatever you want to call it. So what matters to them? And this, again, will start to influence how much product you buy and the speed maybe that you would sell it at, the means of how you'd sell it, understanding if sustainability matters, etc. So really, again, understanding what your customer wants from your product, how they want it, the newness that they might need, the price point that they might want. Are they a salesperson? Are they not? Again, yeah, really understanding their shopping habits. So again, these are all types of reports that you can look into. And again, I'll keep naming the ones that I use. Statistica, for example, can talk about shopping habits in your country. So again, that would suggest when should you go on sale? When should you have an influx of sales? Again, is it around shopping timings like Mother's Day, etc.? So yeah, really, these kind of headers are prompts for you to go and research and gather the data in your industry. And again, just start to write it all down and then summarize the top few. So it's always about summarizing the data that you're gathering, so it's not an overwhelm. So yeah, think of it like brainstorming. That's exactly what this is. So the next is social media. So this is another way to understand the demand, what's happening, a different kind of way of doing it, which I'm sure probably all of you have done this at some point, is to use the likes of Instagram and look at hashtag trends. So this is something, if you're signed up to Later or similar, which is a social media tool, you would be able to see hashtag trends in your industry. But this one you can do, again, as a manual work within this, is actually start to see the trends, the performance of hashtags for your specific, I wouldn't necessarily say it's an audience, but for that channel, if you know that Instagram, for example, is important to you. So if you start to understand how that's trending and you're literally about to forecast your sales, you're about to go live, this would be an interesting one for you to look at. Also, if you're, again, testing the theory of will your product sell? Is it in demand right now? You can start to test it via engagement posts. So running polls is like the most obviously popular at the moment. So it can be color choices, block choices, design choices, yes, no, you know, have big eyes or not. I don't mind this step. I'm talking about it because I think it's a level of importance, but also don't get hung up on this, because at the end of the day, people can smiley face like things, but it doesn't mean that they'll buy it. So it's just an expression of interest. That's why I think like hashtag trends and looking at the popularity of that is a bit more important, because again, that's a broader spectrum than a like versus a purchase. Like there's a bit more power behind the volume of what's trending of a hashtag, of an actual product, of an engagement in that sense. Then keyword tools, totally talked about this. This is everything we talked about in step one. So this is now, we've got the understanding of the market, of the trends. Now this is again just bringing back in the information that you've already got. So this is what keywords are trending, what's the trend pattern been, so that you know that you're producing to the demand as it's showing you in these specific tools. So just bringing back that research into this step. Knowing your market trends. So this is again another factor which I might have technically touched on in these ones up here, but again, just understanding. So for example, there was the US nearly overstepped its debt the other week, and when Trump left power, the UN, for example, like how are these trends in the market potentially going to affect the sales, potentially going to affect the intake, potentially going to when it comes to import export of your product, like how could this have a knock-on effect, and how could you try again predict this in your market? So a lot of what I'm telling you, and that's why it's not a challenging topic, but there's a lot of I can only influence you, I can only encourage you. I can't give you the handbook because the handbook changes all the time. So all I can do is kind of point you in the direction that this is something that as a business owner, you really do need to focus on, and to just broaden the horizons is in making sure you're seeking enough, but also still being extremely focused that you don't get overwhelmed with information. Because all of these factors, if you can build this model into your business and become reactional, then you've got a better opportunity of the stock that you're purchasing. You can react to sooner. So for example, you'll know what to buy for when and to sell out based on these trends. And on a negative side, it could also be you predict that something's going to happen based on what you're reading. Therefore, you will request the manufacturer to put it back to grade and put the fabric back on the floor for a later date. So you would be cancelling out of commitment because you all of a sudden see it as a high risk because based on the social media trends, it's trended down, or the demand's all of a sudden taken a dip. And it's like, wow, that's high risk for me to continue with this idea, or something crazy political in the world happens. So again, everything that you're doing here, this data that you're gathering, this information that you're summarizing, this will help you to be reactional. So that's the major factor here. With reactional, which is a point I'll talk about later, obviously you can only react when I'm talking about stock when it's closer to home, and also you can only react when you've got a good relationship with your supplier. So these are all things, again, where it's just fundamentally important that you make smart business decisions in the beginning to suit this model that you're wanting, which is high sell-through. So technically, the closer you can bring your manufacturing to home, the more chance you've got, because the shorter the lead time is, therefore you don't have to place it as far in advance. All of those positives. However, it will cost more as the general rule of thumb, but it does enable you to be reactional. So yeah, these decisions, if you want to be high selling, that's kind of a factor that you do actually really need to absorb and take action on. So continuing, so yeah, base, that was out of the 12 steps, that was 6 of them, which give you that, again, building on what you learned in topic 1, which was all about, you've got this niche, you've got this data. This is now switching that data and actually looking at the flow. So this is, when do I need my stock by? Which months will it decline in? Which markets do I think it's going to be risky in? Like starting to map out the sales of your product, because if you understand the sales of your product, you can work backwards from that and then understand how many units that will be per style that you would need to buy. So yeah, this is the base. Listen to the news, sign up to journals, put that like boring day aside in your diary or whatever you want to see it as, to just be this sponge where you can absorb information and also sit back, have a workshop day and work out how you can adapt your current business model to hopefully have the opportunity to be reactional if you do need to change things. So that really just means look at your supply chain. How can you adapt, evolve, whatever it might be, come to some decisions, terms with your current manufacturer, which will enable you to be reactional. Okay, so the next 6 steps. So this is now where, as mentioned, you've got this overall idea of a flow. This is now where you need to get into like, okay, my product, my demand. Let's go back to that. What is the product life cycle of your product? So this is something, again, you need to be very clear with when you're going into purchasing your product, because again, as a business owner, we're talking about high sell-through. So all of these metrics, you're going to be setting yourself. So you're going to have a plan, and you're going to know that you're going to intake it in, so say week 10, and you want to sell out by week 18. So you've given yourself an 8-week life cycle. So break it down. Like, what does that mean? How many units do you have to sell per week to hit that life cycle? So you'd be looking at your sales per week versus the purchase stock, the purchase, the value of the purchase stock, and that would be telling you your sell-through rate. So that's something you could calculate every single week. So really, in the very beginning, it's all good saying I want high sell-through product, but how do you monitor that? So you need to actually make these decisions in the beginning. How you could do that, you could tag things. So you could say this is your core styles, core styles being slow fashion, therefore things that you would expect to have all season, or things that you'd expect to sell through in like 3 months? Like, what is your actual initial kind of starting point KPI? Because that's very important. Because again, if you're wanting this high selling product, what is the actual life cycle you're giving your product to sell through? Because without that, you really can't monitor your performance and know if it's good. So really, really important that that's actually part of the working when you're working out the demand and how much therefore to purchase that product. So once you've understood that, that's an aspect. The next layer of the pie is to kind of just relate back to the base work. But what is going to be your pricing strategy during this life cycle? So again, you'll make a decision as a brand. Are you never going to get the red marker out? Are you never going to mark stuff down? Or is your promotional style going to be, okay, I'll never do, again, the red pen. I'm always going to consider doing a 2-for offer. So you do bundling, for example. And would that be a way for you to sell through your stock is to bundle instead? So pretty much make a decision of when you when you launch your product, what's the life cycle? Within that life cycle, what are your planned promotions and activities? So again, you might not choose to do markdown. You might just choose to keep it selling the whole time. And within this, you might just assume that you'll have peaks in your sales because there's Mother's Day and you might do some marketing activity, for example. So again, really important that before you purchase your goods with the factory, that you've actually, again, considered this, you've mapped it into your workings to say, this is an 8-week selling product. I've got these planned activities. Therefore, the price is going to increase, decrease, whatever. This is the approximate units I expect to sell based on the demand of my product, which links back to step 1. 16,000 people are searching for it. Obviously, you're never going to get 16,000, but if it's got low organic SEO search, you've got more of a chance to get in front of that audience naturally. How much of that 16,000 do you think that you would sell each day? They're the types of breakdowns, forecastings, thought process that you need to be going through. So again, always remembering back to the demand of your product, and the least competition, the higher that your chances are to capture some of those sales. So then the next one, so I don't know what number that is, plan your sales based on the weather. So this is, again, something that is kind of an obvious one, but, we just all you need to mention it. So I think a big thing which annoys me in the industry is a lot of fashion platforms, brands, whatever you want to say, both, they follow the fashion season as opposed to the weather season. So again, in your demand forecasting, just because a fashion says that we shouldn't sell wintry products in February because that's summer in this fashion season, doesn't mean that you shouldn't plan to sell more jackets and knits all the way through till April, and then from April onwards to not really sell any. So based on the category, really do consider the weather, because the weather will, the true weather, which again, there's many a platform that you can look back at the history of the weather in your area by month, and you can then again start to make accurate assumptions of how much you'd sell, more so of specific categories based on the weather. So something that you totally shouldn't overlook. And also with that, which is something for like the future of your business, a lot of brands, like for example, when I was at New Look, they used to keep a record of it. So, in a spreadsheet in your budgets, you could actually jot down what the weather was like that week. Was it unusually cold? Was it unusually warm? So it's actually then something that you can build on and have your own weather predictions based in your area, which is something that's quite interesting for you to work on. Okay, so the final few. So when you're demand forecasting, so everything that I'm saying is trying to teach you to be scientific, to be based on the demand, don't do anything more than that. Sorry, quickly. Yeah, but so you can be safe, you can be overarching, but also within that it's about finding the happy medium. So you would love to sell out of your product time and time and time again, but also with that becomes a challenge. So yes, it's great to have high selling product, but does that always mean disappointing the customers that didn't get there in time? So it's a case of everything we've just talked through that will have suggested that you need to buy 100 units of the dress because you've got an 8-week selling period. So it's a suggestion. It's not, again, it's something you need to decide based on your model. Do you want to sell through, move on, that's it? Or do you want to add that extra percentage on there, which gives you some wiggle room if it does sell really well? It's not too much, therefore you wouldn't be putting yourself in a stock deficit. So I think plan for more than just your base sales. So all of the calculations that I've talked through, these are things where then you can sit back and say, okay, all of my calculations say it's 100, but is 100 actually enough? Do I want to add an extra 10% on there for safety in case it is a bestseller and I want to get back into it quickly? So this is something, again, when I'm talking about plan for more than just your baseline sales, this is a consideration. Say if you're based in the UK and your manufacturing is in China, it's not as quick as somebody that's manufacturing in Italy, for example. So yeah, really consider it's all about your business model, this point. So again, it's not black and white. It's something that you need to decide what do you want to do and achieve. And this again would come back to research you completed in the first step, which I skipped over for now. Audience. What does your audience want? Are they very much all about like the newness? Is that what you saw from your competitors, that was an advantage that you should take and that you should be producing newness because that's what they said they couldn't get from your competitor? So again, everything that you learn in that first topic will help you to influence these decisions of actually how much product should you be making and the frequency of it. Cool. So the last two are just kind of tips more than real steps. So as I've already mentioned, to be honest, this one, if you want to produce to demand, which that is kind of the dream business model. It's tricky, but it's the dream where it's like, I'll get an order and then I'll place it with the manufacturer. If you want to produce to demand, then that is all about literally having your factory at the end of your street. You need it really close. And then you can actually run this model. So obviously that's pretty unrealistic for most of us. So it's about making that decision. If you really want to have that pre-sale, produce to demand, or you just always buy short. And then if you run out, you can buy more quickly and have it back in stock. It's just all about making that decision, which again is something that you need to weigh up. Is the cost price worth it to have this lean stock model? Because that's what it is. So it might put you off and you might be operating on a slimmer margin, but is it worth it to always just have this like high sell through? Because you're never putting yourself as a business into debt because you're having to buy loads of stock without being guaranteed it would sell. A huge decision for you to make, but that's only one that you can weigh up. And you could do trials on this. You could trial a new manufacturer on that principle, see how it goes, and then obviously invest into it further. Cool. And then in this, hopefully it's come across, but it's not. Never be afraid to reforecast the forecast. So your budget, rather, reforecast your budget. So demand forecasting is not, as I mentioned, I can't give you a book that says do this. It's something that you have to be reactional to. So it comes back to that. So adjusting the forecast is something that every single fashion brand does. on a monthly basis in a more structured manner if you're at a big brand. But what you plan today for, say, autumn, winter next year, from July next year, is probably going to change, highly likely, because everything we've just talked through in these kind of earlier bits, the trends, different factors, economics, etc., they really could have an effect on what you've put into this forecast. So therefore, never be afraid to reforecast. And if anything, I'd actually encourage you to revisit your numbers. And again, if you've got a good supply base, you can affect what you've either purchased by adding to it or taking away from it. So it's all about being reactional. Okay, cool. So that's me talking through the checklist. So next step, this is obviously you. I'm not going to do it in detail because I can't, because I've got to be conscious of time. Table it. So I've just talked, given you loads of info, but what you would need to do is actually to table it. So actually to be like, okay, she's given me all this info. I've done all this research. I've got my answers. Cool. What does this look like? What does the dollar look like, or the pound? Sorry. So template. Let's go. I don't know if it's this one. Nope. This one. Yep. Okay, cool. So yeah, now this is as basic as it can be. This is a budget template. So pretty much what this is doing is, in this top section, it's so basic. So this is something I'd encourage you to evolve, or happily message me after and I can help you. But what you would want to do is have your months broken into weeks. And up here is just your working. It's just your way of quickly doing this task, which I'm not encouraging you to do it quickly. I'm encouraging you to do it detailed. But what would happen here is your sale events. So when do you think you're going to have highs and lows in your sales? And this is a starting point. This is just literally saying, in this month, I've got 8 options. My units were 50 per that. So my total buy. So I've got 400 units that's coming into the business, brand spanking new, 400 units. And this is the ASP. However, my ASP would actually be higher than this. But what I'm planning is, because it's in November, I'm planning in the week 2 and 3 of November that I'm actually going to enter into Black Friday. I'm going to have sale events happening. Therefore, my ASP, my average selling price, is going to decrease during these weeks. Therefore, here I can calculate the average and look down here, which would then start to bring it into retail sales. You'd apply a return rate to this, because you'd never sell 100% of something. You're going to get something back. Therefore, of the 400 units you're expecting to buy at 48, that equals 13,000. So this is obviously looking at the amount of stock you have bought. So this is not the way I'm telling you to do it. You could actually look at, okay, what's my sales going to look like during these weeks? So you could actually start to plot in. So I think it's going to be a really high week this week. So your number here could be, based on Black Friday, selling at this, you think it's going to be like a $10,000 month. So then if you think you're going to make 10 there, you think that one's going to be better, and then you think you're going to drop here to like 2. So if you plan it based on, this is the sales I think I'm going to make versus the units, do it either way, it doesn't matter. Then all you would need to do is to work backwards from this. So of that is going to be divided by your selling price, and then that would tell you the options that you would need to have to, based on that selling price, that you would need to buy, not the options. So that's just saying that's 32. So that's not very many units that you would need based on that selling price to sell that much. So that's small amount of units. So however you want to work it, you can either do it up at the top and say, okay, I think these months it's going to be 55, it's going to be 57 units, like base it on units, or base it on the cash value that you think you're going to sell in those months. However you want to work it, what you're trying to get back to is based on your assumptions, your predictions, based on the sales, based on when you think you are going to intake and start selling the stock by, based on your life cycle. So is it, 1 through to 8? So you can plot this in here. You can start to play around with it. And you could do it option by option. So literally have the picture of the product. This is what I'm wanting to buy. This is when it's going to come in by based on your critical path. This is the week life cycle. This is my planned events here. This is therefore the ASP because it's going to be less than its full selling price, and start to plot it out. And it's the best way to do it. So you could hide a lot of this. That doesn't need to be there. It's irrelevant for now. And you could actually then start to have product by product down here and start to look at the week's flow. So you'd actually start to build a range plan, which would come down. So you'd have like your products, blah, 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 blah down here. And then you'd have when it would go live. So, you could mark it with a color. And then you would have your 8-week timeline. So you could maybe make it a softer color. And then you'd start to say, okay, what are my events during that time? And then you'd start to, once you've got it, so you would then be able to total what were your retail sales? And then let's say you bought 400 units at that, so that would equal times this. It wouldn't be that, so it would be a cost price we need to work out first. Excuse me for doing this without so you'd want to work out that by 0.30. Oops, wrong way around. So all I'm trying to do here, sorry, without explaining it, why is that not working? Oh, times. Okay, what I'm doing here is then trying to work out your sell-through. So for example, what that sum is doing is saying that selling price, it cost, it's 30% is the cost that I'm paying. So if something's been sold at 48, I'm paying the manufacturer 14.25. So that's your cost price of the goods, because we'd always look at how much you'd pay the manufacturer and then times this. So therefore that's the actual cost, which that doesn't seem right. I think it actually is this. Yeah, that's more like it. And then equal percentage, way around. 44, 43. Okay, so all I've done there, which probably makes zero sense, product came in, had how many weeks that is lifespan. We're saying that during that time, this is how much you sold. So that's actually the retail sales versus how much it actually cost for you, the cost of the goods, the stock. So therefore, based on that, this is actually the sell-through rate that you've achieved. So yeah, that's like a way of calculating it. So you can kind of KPI yourself to say, okay, maybe it needs to sell for longer because you want a greater sell-through rate, or you need to challenge yourself to say, I need to make more money in those months. Therefore, maybe my price needs to go up because that's too low to make. The lower your price, the lower your sales. So play around with this, list it down here, and that's where you can start to play with your demand. Keep a tab to make to write down your notes of like what you've thought, assumptions that you've made, etc. So yeah, anyway, that was very quick and probably a bit slapdash and all over the joint. So sorry. Feel free to ask me more after. But yeah, very important. And that is, again, how you don't just say, my supplier told me that I have to make 200, so I'm going to make 200. Nah, that's like not good enough. If you aren't going to sell 200, you know that because you've done the workings. Do not buy it, because you are never going to have a high sell through. So that's why the more mathematical you can be by doing this type of work, you're going to produce the right amount based on what you forecasted as your sales, which again is a forecast, it's not gospel. But if you link back to step one, which is all about the demand, you know there is somebody wanting your product, they're actively searching for it, you've got the competitive advantage, blah, blah, blah. So therefore, you've got a freaking good chance when you've done a good forecast that you're going to achieve it. Okay, right, moving on. So I think I've not done very well. So this one hasn't worked very well. But I'm going to jump backwards so you can see it. Hopefully you can see a little shape happening over here, but pretty much forecasting is like an optical illusion. It's hard to actually see it. So, but trust me, it's all about pattern making. So you are literally forecasting, you're creating patterns, and it might not make sense, but trust me, what it is there, the importance, the maths that you're doing is there. So pretty much stick with it. Yeah. It's not obvious, it's there. It's all about reading the data and trying to make sense of it. So again, hello, what's happening there? Try and make sense. It's all about the bigger picture. So yeah, from the granular detail, think bigger picture, don't get sucked into a well, and pretty much just don't guesstimate. Like, nah, don't guesstimate. It's not worth it. You're never going to have high selling product. It's just not worth it. The more scientific you can be, the higher your sell-through will be, the more successful you'll be. So just become comfortable with this and trial it, test it. But yeah, try and immediately act on what I've just talked through. Cool. So step 3. So this one is audience. So how I'm tackling this is, because I feel like I'm talking to a lot of people that have already got an audience, or you've already sold products, or you've already got a brand. So you're not literally at the, startup stage. So I'm going to talk about how you can learn from what you've got and what are the major kind of tools that you need to use, again, to really, really build deep roots with these customers. Cool. So I think I've just said that. So you're a brand, you've already got a product. Why it's important. I don't need to go over this. Let's just get into it because I've just noticed the time. Okay, so you've got data. I want to pretty much ask you, so what data do you have and how are you using it? So don't worry now if I go through something and you're like, oh my God, I haven't done this. That's fine. Just go ahead and set it up and you can start tracking and monitoring it, because it will help you to learn more about your audience. Because at the end of the day, if you know who your audience is, you can then do so much more in your designs, in your price point, in everything that will actually ensure that you target them more specifically. Cool. So these slides are pretty ugly, but this Google Analytics. So pretty much with Google Analytics, you may or may not have it, but it's fundamentally important that you set it up to your website. And within it, it's a way that you can actually know who your audience is. Like, you might guesstimate. Why would you do that when you can actually use data to see what's the demographics of them, what's their behavior? So what are they put off by? What are they put on by? To actually track your overall performance. So Google Analytics is so important. It'll help you in numerous other ways, but it's something that you really need to tap into. And within it, you can start to cluster together audiences. If you're trying to look for the similar habits happening and you want to learn more about them specifically. But active users is something you can look at. Behavioral flows, as mentioned, it will help you to investigate how they're reacting to your product on your site, because I'm talking about you right now as if you've got something live. So it could be you don't have product selling, but you've got a blog. How are they engaging with the blog? Do they engage more about the article that, again, is about sustainability? Therefore, it shows that they're interested in that. Therefore, it gives a suggestion that you should be doing more sustainable products or marketing or whatever, which will help to drive your engagement, your traffic to your platform, therefore would help to increase the sales of that specific product, which increases your sell-through. So metrics, these are just ones: acquisition. So this is pretty much the major ones that you'd be looking at. So it helps you know the volume of your users and how well the audience works. It's a new oh my God, I can't speak. New user percentage. Behaviors. So again, this is engagement. So this one's super important. So like, did they get bored? Did they leave your site? What's the bounce rate? Again, when you're trying to track who they are, what do they react to when you're doing more of an insight into the deep dive of who they are, this is a good one. And then, conversion is obviously, did they actually convert to what they wanted them to? So obviously you're a website, therefore, did they convert and buy your product? Yes or no? So they're the metrics that you really need to be focusing on for Google Analytics. And how you respond, I won't go over this, kind of common sense. So obviously, if something's got a high bounce rate, they don't like it, stop doing it, take that page off, take that product off. So we're not really talking about how to respond. We're trying to right now understand more about your audience, because if you've got Google Analytics set up, then you can start to dig into this. So the next one, which I'm sure all of you have, which is a bit easier. So Facebook Analytics. I'm not sure if any of you are really using this right now, but it's actually a bit of a no-brainer. So I'll quickly show you mine, which I might have all sorts that pops up. So sorry. So pretty much come to your page, and then down the menu bar, you'll see, I think I've already clicked on it, but insights. I can't remember to go back. Sorry, page insights. There we go, because I don't want to lose this. And then all you can do on here, not all, everything you can do. So you can start to see how many people have used your page. You can start to change the range period. So like in the last however many days, I've hardly had anybody. You can start to understand the reach of your posts. So everything for me is organic, so I haven't done any paid advertising. What's the overall engagement been, which is something that it's good for you to look at. If you've been doing paid engagement, have they engaged with it, or is it just organic? Interestingly, more so, which is what I'd encourage you to look at to start to understand more about your audience. So here you can start to see when they're online. So then you actually post your product, for example, when they're actually there. Also, you can start to see your posts. So obviously I'm not a selling product, but what was the most engaged post that you did? Let's say that this is about a red dress, therefore that just shows that's high engagement. How can I do more of that? So this is again talking about the activity of your audience. What do they engage with most? And then you again can start to document this and understand more. So you've seen their activity on your own website, you've seen their activity on your social channels, where you could potentially be posting product. What do they dislike? What do they like? Because this again is extremely suggestive of how you can either market to them. So you can be, using the image that they engage with the most, or you can be doing more of that product to actually connect with the audience, your audience. Don't forget, this is your audience. So the more that you can learn about them, the better. So that's Facebook Analytics. Let's jump back. Instagram, very similar. So we all might use different tools, but pretty much I've already talked about the hashtag factor. So you can kind of see which one's got the most engagement, but that's not necessarily your audience. What you can start to do, so for example, I've got later, which is, I'll just open that one. So you've got analytics here. So everybody will probably have a different one, but you can start to again see your audience. So you can see again, when are they active, when are they online? So you can again target product posts to actually hopefully engage with them more. So you can understand about their demographics. So I mainly have a male audience, which is, I think, interesting, and their age range. So this again just starts to help you understand, but what you're really wanting to know more about again is actually the engagement of your posts. So this is what you're trying to more deeply understand, because again, you can look at the tools taught in step one, which is all about what does Google say, what does YouTube say, what's the demand based on e-commerce, the big platforms. But at the end of the day, if you've already got an audience, what do they say? So this is where if you have a tool like this, you can start to track, again, imagine this was product. you can start to say, okay, out of all of this, how many likes were there, how many saves? That's one of the most important ones. And I think I've got it on here. This one shows you like completion. So this is actually on stories. So of stories, like how many people actually moved you forward, which that's the forward rate. So I got pushed forward quite a bit here, but how many people exited? So that's not very good. So you'd want to start to look at, okay, this was good. People hung around for this story. What was that story about? Okay, that shows my engagement rate's high. That's what my audience is interested in. Therefore, how can I give them more of that content? How can I produce more of those products? Was it the price point? Was it the promotion? So this is something that really, again, you should be doing as a minimum once a week, is starting to look at the analytics. So if it's Google, if it's Facebook, if it's your posting tool, and starting to say, okay, because it's not always about your sales. You can look at your sales report and say, I sold 50 units again this week. Cool. I know it was the black jeans and the white top, but that's the hard sales, which teaches you information. But what you're trying to get to is, how do you understand more about the audience? And this could be, if you get it right, this could be your method to converting, because you're wanting to create the right content to engage with your audience, which will then convert them to making the sale. So if you've got high performing content that you can see, and you understand the demographics of your audience because you've got all the information on them, on all of these tools that track, then how do you actually create the content to convert? So that's kind of the end goal for this specific thing that I'm showing you. Okay. Another one, I've completely forgotten the name of it now, but this is just a broader way of seeing it. I need to try find its name. Here we go, Social Blade. So Social Blade is another one where you can actually look at the analytics of performance. So this is where you could do YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, etc. And you can actually start to look at your competitors. So it's a really good way, again, to, when you're doing the competitor analysis in step one, to actually start to be like, okay, why is that competitor got so much engagement? What are they doing? I want to understand more. So you can actually do that. And this is something, again, you could track your own performance. And again, you could start to understand more about why your competitors doing it. How's the audience engaging with X content? How do you be inspired, copy that style, because they've got the highest conversion, and that's what you want to get for your product, for your posts. So taking inspiration from them. Next one. So this one, Shopify. So this is obviously assuming that majority of you would be on Shopify, because it's kind of the most common one. But if you don't already have it, I'm just going to exit so I can make this bigger. There's a download. So you'd have to upgrade your package, and then you would have analytics. And in analytics, you'd have insight. So this is, again, similar to what Google Analytics would teach you. This is actually built into your online store. So you can actually start to understand, for your specific store, for your specific audience, for everybody that's landing on there, what are the products that have the highest potential. So this is actually a tool that Shopify does for you. So it actually suggests, so they didn't get much traffic but sold well is this case. So there's actually different reports that it can pull that suggest to you the ones that had high conversion rates. And so therefore it's an opportunity to say, okay, my customers come onto my platform and these are the products that they are clicking on, that they're engaging with the most. Therefore, can you produce more of that product? Can you use more of that imagery in your adverts? What can you do to actually use this data, this information to help you to convert more, to actually selling? But also it's about selling, but it's about learning about the behaviors of your audience. So what do they love the most, and how can you give them more of that? Because again, you're trying to hit on this demand, this popularity in what you're producing and therefore selling. So if you don't already have that, have it. And again, in this like weekly flow, that's something that you should be looking at. Furthermore, which is part of kind of the competitor analysis, if you can add on, again, an extra bolt-on to your store, Shopify or similar, this is one Stamped, which is a loyalty program, which pretty much, if you give a review, it gives your customer points. And why a review is so important? Because it's literally direct dialogue from your customer. It's your customer saying like, I love it, I hate it, giving you feedback, and you're incentivizing them to do that, because most people don't do things unless they're incentivized. So it is an idea, again, so that you can learn why your product did well or didn't do well. Normally it would do well because it's being purchased. And then again, this will help to influence future designs or ideas, because your customer has directly told you so. So I would look to add a program like that to your site. Other ways to learn more about your audience is to just go on forums. So again, this is a way to kind of test your idea in the beginning. You can use, again, all the tools that Uber suggests, the Google keywords, but also you can start to post in forums. So finding Facebook groups in sustainability, for example, and joining them and starting to post about an idea, or questioning the price point for this type of product. Like, these are ways that you can gain access to a very, very broad audience, which might not be your audience. So be cautious that you join the right groups in these forums. But again, it's a way of verifying what you're wanting to do before rushing into it to get some validation. But also, yeah, this is a broad way of learning about your audience. And then surveys, so Google Forms. This is one that is actually step 5 of this today's lecture, validation. So validation is so important. So in step 1, we talked about validating. I haven't talked about it because we're doing it now, but do all of this research, validate, ask your audience. And the same here, learning more about your audience, survey them. Like, it is literally a no-brainer. So if you've already got a mail list, fantastic. Like, even if it's 10 people, it doesn't matter. If it's more, fantastic, but ask them. So never be afraid, especially for your current email list, probably once a month would be enough, but incentivize them to fill in a survey. And how you can do that quite inexpensively is using Google Forms, which I can just show you. This is an old one of mine. So it's really easy to fill in Google Forms. It's free. And you can, make it look pretty. You can do it in sections. You can make short answers, long answers. It can be multiple choice or not. So you can construct a really easy hyperlink, fill it in, jobs done survey. And what I encourage with that is that you actually incentivize, oops, that's the wrong one. You incentivize people to complete it. And what this is doing is you're not just asking them anything, you're asking them specifically more information about what they desire from a brand selling X, or what's missing, or what are their favorite brands, or what's the reason that they buy. So again, it's a way of learning more specifically about your audience because they're in your email list. And actually making sure then you produce the product to suit their pain points, to suit their needs, their desires in the market. So questionnaires are really, really good and a way to, incentivize them pretty much. So complete this and I'll give you an ASOS voucher, or complete this, you'll get a John Lewis voucher, whatever it might be. And obviously it wouldn't be everybody. It would just be like a competition style that you do it. And within doing this, maximum 10 questions, only one open answer. And what that means is free text, because if you do free text, people are lazy, they won't answer it properly. Encourage you to do that. I'll skip over Facebook so you can read that another time. And this is just a suggestion of like questions that you would do. So like, would you buy biodegradable swimwear? That's a niche. Is that going to put people off? That's a really great question to ask your audience. Like, would they actually buy you or not? Really important. Would they buy off a marketplace, or would they buy directly with a brand? Like, ask them the questions that are burning desires of yours to really get to know them more, to really know why they're not buying your product or why they would buy your product. So again, connecting with your audience on a deeper level is going to help you to sell your product. We'll skip over this. And again, the more answers you get, the better. And it's all then about analyzing your data. So once you get the answers, especially if you use Google Forms, it actually summarizes it for you. So then it's quite easy for you to like roll it up into a summary, and yeah, that's your data, that's your analysis. Cool. Other factors, I'll quickly go over this because I'm conscious I've got a bit of more time. So again, in getting to know your audience, ways that you can go back to this theory of testing the engagement is ways you could choose different model types. You could choose how natural they look or don't. You could choose like how you pair it back with jewelry, whatever you're trying to go for in your vibe. How does it engage? How does it convert? And you have to kind of play around with this and trial to actually start to understand your audience more, and actually what they react to, who they react to. Because yeah, nowadays it's even more so a topic of inclusivity. So we all talk about this and feel pressured as a brand, as a business, but actually does your audience engage? Because at the end of the day, you can be seen to be being this amazing, sustainable brand that's doing X, Y, Z. But if the customer doesn't actually engage with it, then you're not going to make sales. So again, it's about balancing what you want to be seen to be doing as a business owner, but also how much money you're going to make from it. So it's a realistic level decision for you to make, but a way to before jumping into that is to actually test your audience to see how they react to it. Cool. So I think I'm totally not going to get through this. We've done a bad job today. So step 4 is pricing strategy. So this is one which you can totally read for yourself. It's far more comprehensive than my other slides, but pretty much for pricing strategy, as I've mentioned, this is probably one of the biggest bits, perception. So a price will either turn you on or it will turn you off. So it is really important that you consider that, and you again don't just rush into any decisions. So again, going into a survey, it can be very much about asking your audience how much they would pay for a certain type of product. But perception is extremely important. And then moving beyond that, so I'm kind of speeding up, so sorry everybody. Perception, mentioned that. Then it's just about going into this further. You know who your competitors are. How do you compare to your competitors? Are you competitive or not? So really do the analysis that will actually tell you. So looking at entry and exit price points for your competitors, it will tell you how you position yourself in the market. So again, because you know about your audience, you know what they value. Do they want affordable, or are they happy to spend money for sustainability? Once you understand that, and going back to your market research that could have suggested that it's affordable fashion and whatever the research suggests to you, you need to compare versus your competitors and make a decision of where you should position yourself in the market and what's important to you. So again, these are decisions that will be strategical. It's nothing that you should make. It shouldn't be a quick decision. But this is a way that you can table it and actually start to see and look at the averages. I won't talk over that. Another way is to compare third parties, which is something that's more applicable for wholesale, but it's really good to look at what your competitors do on other channels. So do they price the same on their own website as they do on Instagram, as they do on ASOS? Like, have a comparison, because you'll be surprised what you learn here, that they'll be up pricing or down pricing because an ASOS customer is different to their own customer. So what can you learn from that? How can it influence how you price? Next, be aware of conversion rates, because again, you need to be competitive, but you need to be profitable. So that comes back to, again, you want to make sure you break more than break even. You don't want to break yourself, but you want to be competitive. So just be aware of exchange rates. And this kind of links back to, again, knowing your market, knowing what's changing, knowing the economics, etc., the US debt, Brexit, etc. So be aware. And then it's all about tabling it up. So knowing what your prices are. Down this side, you would have an idea of what category that is. You'd know that this is kind of your keen, lean price point. And then once you've got this, you can start to profit model it. So this would then be, what's my cost price? Any of the factors, that duty, freight rates, etc. And then you can start to look at what's your margin. So that's the very, very important final step. But pretty much the biggest thing is, how do you position yourself with your competitors? What's the perception? And therefore, do you think a customer would buy you? Looking back at all the research, all of their needs, it's perception, competitive nature of your price point, because a price will turn you on or turn you off. So that's kind of the most important thing to remember. Did that really quickly. And then the last one, which is actually quick, is do due diligence and ask your audience. So if you follow this, you'll do so much research, and at the end of the day, you can't be the one to make the decision. You need to actually ask your audience. You need to go back there, go broader than just yourself, than your friends and your family, and you actually need to validate your product. Again, this is all talking of in the immediate, not in the aftermath. And you really need to make sure that of the decision that you've made, you've found this niche, you know that the data backs it up, you've learned more about your audience, you know what their needs are, you've got this great price, put it in front of them. So this is an idea of what you've got, and actually test it. So ways you can do that, you can do pre-sell. So you can actually do a dummy launch. You could host a pop-up store. So you can actually do many inexpensive ways to do this. You could produce a handful of things via a seamstress, hopefully a lower cost, as opposed to going to a factory. And you can actually test. So actually test the engagement of your product. So that's easier said than done, because you need to market it before you need to actually do a really good attempt at doing it. So that's kind of a soft way to do it if you don't have the revenue to put behind it. But really, if you don't want to do that option, then go back to the survey that I suggested, which is a Google form. And once you've done all of this research and you really think you've hit the nail on the head, send out a survey and actually test people, like, would they put a deposit down for this? What's right or wrong? And quiz them, ask them. And the biggest thing you're trying to get is if they can exchange money for it. That would be a fantastic way to truly test the success of your idea, of your product. But obviously that might not always be the case when you're doing a survey. But yeah, so validation is just so important. It's been talked about the whole way through this. So yeah, don't just leave it to your decision. Make sure you check back in with your audience. And yeah, that would be how to produce a high selling product. So yes, that is me. I think I've got 8 minutes to spare, so I did that very quickly in the end. But yeah, I've got a blog on my website full of loads of different articles. So if you haven't checked it out, that's the hyperlink on the screen. So go have a look. And yes, breathe. So here are all my handles for you. So Instagram is just my name, Facebook, Kylie Johnson Connections, and then LinkedIn, I'm just Kylie Johnson again. So all of those are hyperlinked, so you'll be able to go and check me out and connect and say hi.